Avraham Gileadi has got an incredible story. He found the Book of Mormon and found the church in the land of Israel and then was baptized in the land of Jerusalem. He is an amazing scholar on the book of Isaiah and has some insights that you really need to learn about. If you really want to know what the Book of Mormon means, if you want to know what it's built around and understand its teachings, you've got to learn Isaiah first. And Avraham has got a very unique approach to learning what the book of Isaiah is all about, up to the point of naming a number of the ancient civilizations that represent certain kingdoms or nations today. You're going to learn a lot in this interview. Before we get started, I want to talk about Scripture Notes. Scripture Notes is the application that I use every single day for my scripture study. As I always say, it is a very fluid product. I'm able to pull from here, from there, incredible search capabilities, numerous different windows that I can put up simultaneously, and many, many tools that allow you to take your scripture study to the next level. It really is a transformational product. Go to scripturenotes.com. That's scripturenotes.com and give it a try. Here we go. All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we have a very special guest, Avraham Gileadi. I'm very excited about this interview. He's got an amazing story and great information on a book we all need to understand, and that is the book of Isaiah. Avraham, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, Avraham, I want to start this off setting the stage before we get into the book of Isaiah, because we're going to delve really into this with all of your all of the information that you have. We're not going to get everything out of you, but we're going to try and get as much as we can out of you in this hour or so. And but I want to set the stage with your background, because you have a very unique background on how you came to the church. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I found the church in Israel, of all places. I was born in Holland, raised in New Zealand, and when I was in New Zealand, I was becoming very interested in the Old Testament after reading the New Testament, and especially in the book of Isaiah, which I felt, yeah, it did seem distant like it does to most people, but I somehow felt that it related to our day, but I didn't have an explanation. But I just gravitated that book from the get-go. From the moment I read it, there was something about it. So over time, well, actually I started a rock and jazz group in New Zealand, but when I read the books of Adam and Eve, which are an apocryphal book about the children of Cain who lived on the plain, and they would entice the people of the covenant down from the mountain mesa where they lived with this music, it said, that ravished the soul. So when I was playing drums and singing with my guitar and seeing all these people rocking and rolling out on the floor, I thought, well, I'm playing music that ravishes the soul. So I thought, hey, I'm going to give this up. This is not good. So then began my spiritual quest. I had a spiritual childhood in the Netherlands, but I saw that Jews were fulfilling prophecy somehow in Israel, and I wanted to be part of that. So I looked in the back of an old Bible, it's the only map I could find of Israel, and pointed to a biblical spot on the map. And then the name was Jezreel, in the Jezreel Valley. I said, I'm going to go to Israel. When I go there, I'm going to go to that place. And so over time, I was able to earn enough money and go to Israel. And it did feel like a homecoming, strangely enough. And I asked a taxi to stop by the nearest plowed field, and I kissed the ground and felt like I was home again, the land of my ancestors somehow. So I learned some Hebrew on a kibbutz, not the place I wanted to go to, but one day I walked into the kibbutz office in Tel Aviv and asked the person there, I would like to go to kibbutz Jezreel. And they said, well, the kibbutz secretary of that kibbutz only comes here every 3 months, but happens to be here today. So I said, okay. So I asked him if I could come and work on kibbutz Jezreel. And he said, why do you want to come to kibbutz Jezreel for? I said, I don't know. I just still have this feeling inside me. So he allowed me to come. And it turns out it was a modern kibbutz built on the site of ancient Jezreel in the Bible, where King Ahab and his wife Jezebel had a summer palace. And it turns out to be the only place, at least at that time, for immigrants from New Zealand and Australia and South Africa in Israel. So I felt right at home among New Zealand, immigrants from abroad to Israel to become citizens. And one day I went for a book to read in the library, my first book in Hebrew, right? I was really excited. So this lady librarian in the Cwic library hands me the Book of Mormon in English and said I should read it. I said, oh, no, thank you. I don't want to read that. I thought, that's too much. She said, no, this is for you. You must read this book. So to be polite to her, I just took it and looked at it out of curiosity. And the more I looked into it, the more I found that every time I read it, I was filled with light. And so I realized that later that was the Holy Ghost. And then I looked around for the churches.
By the way, why would a librarian be giving you a Book of Mormon in Israel?
I'm sure.
Why does she even have it?
Right, exactly. She had it because she told me that an American volunteer had spent time on that kibbutz some time back and had left that book in the library. And I'm sure she dabbled in it. And she saw that I was not like the other guys, that I was spiritually oriented. So I think she said, no. I'm sure she felt the Holy Ghost. So not only was that kibbutz a place for, New Zealand immigrants, which I was going to become that. And then secondly, there's also probably the only place in Israel where there was a Book of Mormon at all. So that kind of was a double sign to me. And so I began to pursue Judaism from that point, and I couldn't find the church in Israel for a long time until I was in rabbinic school in Jerusalem, in diaspora yeshiva on Mount Zion. And after a year of studying there and reading I took a class on Isaiah with a rabbi. Most of the students were doing Talmud, but I was so interested in Isaiah. And this teacher, I don't remember a whole lot of what he taught us, but I remember things like, clean animals, kosher animals, they represent the house of Israel, and unclean animals represent the Gentiles, things like that. But I learned how to analyze like the Jews do, which is akin to learning the manner of the Jews in Book of Mormon that Nephi talks about. So after a year of that, I came across the advertisement of the church in Israel. They had a Israel group at David Galba's house in Bethany. And so I wrote to that address, got a letter back immediately. And then I went like Nicodemus for fear of the Jews to David Galba's house at night to ask thousands of questions about the gospel. And when I felt that this was the right place and David was full of the Spirit of the Lord, then I asked to be baptized, and I was baptized early one morning in the pool of Siloam when it was still clean. And
wow.
And then soon after that, Israel passed a law since that no Jewish people could be baptized in Israel. So they had to go to Cyprus or somewhere else. So I was the first Israeli citizen to be baptized in Israel. Maybe even the last, I don't know, at least up to this time. So there's so many unique things about the story of mine. I just feel really blessed that the Lord has looked out for me that way.
So you start off here, you have this interest in Isaiah, you pursue this, you get your doctorate, I believe, right? You write your thesis on Isaiah.
At BYU, yes.
At BYU, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you come across is it Brownlee that you're looking
Yes.
at? You're a scholar named Brownlee who's studying the Isaiah scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yes. How does that become part of what you're looking at, and how does it start to form your view of the book of Isaiah?
Right. So a year after my baptism in Israel, in the pool of Siloam, where Jesus healed the blind man. And by the way, Orson Hyde dedicated the Holy Land for the return of the Jews on my birthday, 99 years earlier. There's just so many connections, right? It's just crazy. Well, anyway, yes, I did a PhD at BYU in ancient studies, and Nibley was my chairman. I had a great committee as well, to whom I'm thankful, and studied under different professors, including one in Toronto, Roland K. Harrison, probably the most famous Old Testament scholar in the world, and Kent Brown.
Did you say New Testament?
Old Testament.
Old Testament. Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Toronto and studied with him, and he had a colleague, William Brownlee, who in the 1950s, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, he noticed in the complete Dead Sea Scroll of Isaiah, it's of St. Mark's Monastery, not the one in the museum in Jerusalem, that there was a kind of a break or a lacuna or a space of several lines worth between the first 33 chapters of Isaiah and the second 33 chapters of Isaiah. And that each of those two halves of the book of Isaiah, of 33 chapters each, divided into 7 parts that paralleled one another like this, and he thought it was simply a mechanical structure. And those 7 parts were like different genres of the book of Isaiah, like historical material, biographical material, or prophecies or teachings and so forth. And he thought maybe they were kind of a loose way of paralleling the different parts of Isaiah. But Harrison had me do that for my doctoral thesis, and it turned out to be way more than just a loose parallelism. And that got me going on all my research. I did 10 more years of postdoctoral work on that very same literature structure, and found it was a prophecy and a theology both. The prophecy was of an end time scenario. It totally converted the whole book of Isaiah into an end time scenario, as well as being historical, but in which the historical parts act as an allegory of the end time. And it had a complete theology of the fullness of the gospel, even richer than we have in the New Testament, because it's completely like instead of salvation, exaltation, we'll have suffering before salvation, or humiliation before exaltation, ruin before rebirth, punishment before deliverance, and themes like that. Give a much fuller context to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Sure. Okay. So you talk about the structure of the 7-part structure, which goes through all 66 chapters, correct?
Yes. Right.
Okay. So this is very different from the scholarly world and what they would accept right now, because they're going to look at first Isaiah, second Isaiah, sometimes third Isaiah, where they're talking about pre-exile, the exile, and then a homecoming, so to speak, back to Jerusalem.
Yes. Right.
This is, for most scholars of the Old Testament or biblical scholarship, this is almost gospel to them, and it's yet you're saying that there is one structure that goes throughout all of the book of Isaiah, which would mean, it seems, that there is one author. Is that correct?
Yes, and I discovered a whole layer of multiple structures overlaid over that 7-part structure. That 7-part structure I call a synchronous structure, because it takes the whole book of Isaiah as a single entity, as a single scenario, in which the historical parts, like I said, serve as an allegory of the end time. But it's an end time scenario. And then the other literary structures that are overlaid from beginning to end of the book, they are linear structures that follow a timeline from Isaiah's day to the end time, or the coming of the Lord to reign on the earth. So yes, there's no way that book was written by several authors. It's the work of one author, and I can explain each of the reasons they give. I'll explain them away. They're just not grounded in truth. From a literary standpoint, I can explain them away.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the main reasons, and you can look at this throughout all of biblical scholarship, right? They don't believe in prophecy. It's just they will not believe in this. You can even look at, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on the Book of Daniel, but it's the same idea. This was written probably more toward the Greco-Roman period, and because they're talking about the prophecies of Daniel, and this would be something that would be known later on, and not that. Look, I mean, maybe there was editing to the book, and there were things added in. But more than likely, I mean, you've got to look at the Book of Daniel like, okay, this is a real prophet that was in Babylon and is prophesying. And prophecy is okay if you're a believer.
Yes, if you're a believer, but if you're not, if you're just a professional and a non-believer basically, and just making a game of your profession, which all the liberal scholars do practically, they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in what they've published, some crazy little aspect of the book of Isaiah, of the prophecy, and they get notoriety that way, and they get tenure in academia, and that's the game they play, and that's not true to the content of what the scriptures represent, the Word of God.
Yeah. So I mean, even let's just quickly, even with Latter-day Saint scholars, right, who are believing scholars, they're going to go through their programs, they're going to go get their doctorates, and they're going to get this information about, through a structure of teaching the Word, which is based on literary criticism. It's based on no prophecy. It's mostly framed by atheists and non-Christians, at least, and yet they're going to bring that into Latter-day Saint scholarship, and we have quite a bit of that today. Is that not correct?
Yes, it's correct. However, I call academia, or that aspect of academia, more like a terrestrial exercise, not a celestial exercise. It's on a certain level, and Isaiah doesn't like it. Isaiah can see it in the future. And that does not have kind things to say.
Isaiah talks about this?
Oh, yeah. He doesn't have kind things to say about the wise and the learned. You've probably read some of that. Yeah. He uses amazing satire, by the way. He's so funny at times. Mm-hmm. But yes, so there's now, literary criticism is a good thing. I mean, literary analysis is the key to understanding the book of Isaiah on several levels. One of them is a structural level, like the 7-part structure, because each literary structure has its own message over and above what you read on the surface. So Isaiah uses all of these means to communicate more truth, the truths of God. If you believe them, then yes, it's important to know those tools for understanding Isaiah. And there's also typology in the sense that history repeats itself. Ancient history repeats itself. The Hebrew worldview is cyclical, not linear, not in a straight line. History repeats itself on an ever grander scale in the end time. So, for example, I discovered 30 ancient events that Isaiah uses around which to prophesy new versions of these ancient events as part of an end time scenario. So they're all going to happen, and when they happen, they're like dominoes. They'll fall one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then there is word links and keywords and code names. This is why Nephi and Jacob kind of shied away from, because of the code names. The Jews looked beyond the mark, and the Lord made things complicated for them because they wanted it. And through Isaiah, he does that. But it's also the key to understanding Isaiah in a beautiful way. And it's all part of the manner of the Jews that Nephi said was, an important element for understanding the words of Isaiah. And when you do, not only does the whole book of Isaiah open up to your understanding, but also all the scriptures do in relation to Isaiah, because Isaiah is like the centerpiece of a big tapestry of scriptures, and all of them relate to each other through Isaiah. And it's a magnificent scenario. And
that's a really interesting thing to look at. I mean, what is it? Yeah. You have the New Testament, I believe the number one cited book is Isaiah. Is that correct? I think it's Isaiah first and then Psalm second, I think. And of course you got the Book of Mormon. I mean, it's full of Isaiah. If I'm looking at it, what I have learned in studying all this and reading others other authors on this, it's the whole Book of Mormon is built around Isaiah. It's especially chapter 52 and 53.
You really need to understand Isaiah first before you understand the Book of Mormon.
But here's the problem, Avraham. You've got nobody understands the Book of Isaiah. So, I mean, we go through and we read the Book of Mormon and we apply it to our day. And we look at the spiritual truths that are in here. We look at the history of what's happening and apply it to our current events. Why do we not focus more? It almost seems to me, I honestly, sincerely say this. It almost seems to me like one of those 4 years of Come Follow Me should just be on Isaiah.
Yes, and more, and it would be worth it, because then all the scriptures would open up, and you wouldn't need the manual to tell you what it says, which sometimes gets it right and sometimes doesn't get it right. So, yes, that's true. The book of Isaiah is key. And that's why it's a commandment to search it. And searching is not just reading or studying. It means you really have to dig in and make the connections that are in the book of Isaiah. And it's a deliberate challenge. And if you don't take on the challenge, you're going to lose out in the coming times. I'm testifying of that. But you're wrong on the fact that people don't understand it. There are among us, Greg, in the Isaiah Institute, and those who've read my books over the last few years who do understand it, and they're just full of joy about it. So
here's the question then. So what you're trying to be, it seems to me, is some type of an intermediary between Isaiah and our current modern Western way of thinking, right?
Yeah,
and bringing the cultural and the language and trying to bridge all of these things. Here's a question though. Why? Because I can read, for example, I read Genesis and I read it it doesn't, obviously, if I had a cultural context to it and I understood Hebrew and I could read the underlying Hebrew to it, and this would all make a big difference to me. But I can understand Genesis a lot easier than I can understand Isaiah, right?
Right.
Why is Isaiah so difficult? Why did he write this way in the first place instead of being a little bit more out there and upfront with everything?
Yes, and that's how, in the West, we want it, especially Americans, want it that way. They want everything packaged and nicely wrapped, and you can just undo the wrap, and there it is. No, Isaiah. The reason is, Greg, that the Lord has made Isaiah a deliberate challenge. He raised up Isaiah to do that, and a deliberate challenge for people in the end time, in our day, right now, when things are beginning to explode around us, right, with these wars and rumors of wars. And so, if this is the time, Isaiah is the prophet of the end time. This is the time to get into Isaiah and learn it and understand it. And it'll open up all the things that are coming upon us now, and there'll be no surprises and you'll know exactly what to do. And you know exactly, what spiritual level you're on and what you're striving for to the next spiritual level, from telestial to terrestrial to celestial, and those who will survive and those who won't survive, and where to go. There's a call out in the wilderness, and there's a whole slew of these events are going to happen again from the past. A new Passover, a new Exodus out of Babylon for the house of Israel. We need to know who we are as Latter-day Saints. We need to know that we are identified with the Gentiles, as the prophet Joseph Smith said in the Kirtland Temple dedicatory prayer, and as the Book of Mormon tells us we are. The gospel is restored to the Gentiles. From the Gentiles, it goes back to the house of Israel. But it goes to the house of Israel through a specific category of Gentiles that Isaiah names the kings and queens of the Gentiles in Isaiah 49, 22, and 23, which Nephi and Jacob pounce upon that because it's their lifeline to their end-time descendants, whom they want to be restored. And
I'm sorry, their lifeline to what?
To their end-time descendants who need to be restored. And we're the ones to restore them. These spiritual kings and queens of the Gentiles, which are the Ephraimites, who have the birthright role, need to perform that birthright role and restore the house of Israel, the Jews, the 10 tribes and Lamanites of today. And so are we doing it? No, we're not even aware that that's what it's all about. It's just a pity. And you're right. Isaiah himself says, you've heard the whole vision. Why don't you even mention it? We don't even mention it. And those who do mention it stay on safe soil, so to speak, by quoting just a few things that, that couldn't get too controversial, like fasting, Isaiah 59, 58, stuff like that. But no, the whole picture is huge and it needs to be learned. If we don't learn it, we're going to be in a bad case when the real serious stuff starts dropping around us.
Could it be that reading Isaiah, which is a little more difficult to understand, and searching it out as we're told to do, even by Christ himself in 35, what could it be that the effort that is required to go through this and really understand it is really what helps convert us over into the scriptures, as you say, because Isaiah is kind of this centerpiece of all the scriptures. And without that effort of going through it, it may not be the same thing for you. It may end up being, as we do, your scripture chase, just a bunch of bumper sticker verses here and there that that we
Yeah,
memorize.
right. No, it's the difference between a saved state and an exalted state. You know, if you just want to not dabble in Isaiah, not even get that too excited about it, or if you don't even think that Christ is coming in our day, or possibly that we're nearing the end time. But if you knew Isaiah, you know that we are definitely near the end, very near the end time, or almost in the end time. But if you're not interested in that, and you just want to play it safe and stay in your comfort zone, you know, you may have a remission of your sins and attain a saved state, but no way you're going to attain an exalted state if you're not keeping the commandment to search the words of Isaiah, because they are meant for our day. And no, not everybody has to go through all the motions that I've been through, you know, 10 years of postdoctoral work, figuring this out, this one literary structure and all its richness and treasures of theology and prophecy. No, not everybody has to do that. But what they can do is use the tools that I've provided in my books, in my lectures and seminars and websites. And pretty soon you start putting the pieces together and it becomes an exciting journey. You can do that. And once you do that, you know, the lights start coming on. And if you persist, the full lights will come on, and all the lights will come on, and all the scriptures will suddenly become new territory for you. Why didn't I see this before? Oh yeah, that makes sense. You know, oh, this connects with that. Oh yeah, the Book of Mormon has all these, you know, types and shadows for our day. Why didn't I understand that? Well, because they were following Isaiah, and they wrote less than 100th part of what they could have written at any given time. They say that about 6 or 7 times. So what are the criteria they used? Well, Isaiah's criteria for only including what typifies the end time that they too saw in vision from their own history. You know what I'm saying? So there's a war pattern in Isaiah. There's an Exodus pattern in Isaiah, from all the different wars and from all the different exoduses that happen in the Book of Mormon. I meant there's a war pattern. There's an Exodus pattern in the Book of Mormon that typify the war pattern and the Exodus pattern in the Book of Isaiah. So it's all connected. And once Isaiah comes to your understanding, then you'll see those patterns, and way more things will be, you know, recognizable to you today in the Book of Mormon and in the very times we're living now.
Now you talk about, you know, looking at the other scriptures and understanding maybe why they quote Isaiah so much and what the meaning is behind that, and maybe having a different understanding of the Book of Mormon and a different understanding of the New Testament as examples.
Yes.
Is there an example you have of a quote maybe in the New Testament or in the Book of Mormon of Isaiah that if we just understood the context from studying Isaiah more, that it might open up the meaning for us more?
Several, yeah. Well, you know, the eunuch, the Ethiopian eunuch that Philip encountered, he encountered Philip, and he was reading Isaiah 53, and Philip had to explain it to him. Isaiah 53 about the Lord, you know, taking upon himself our sins and our transgressions. It's a great messianic prophecy, the greatest messianic prophecy in all of Scripture, Isaiah 53, verses 1 through 10. It just shows you that, yeah, somebody really needs to be there for those who don't understand. And that's what I'm trying to do. But take, for example, the precepts of men that Isaiah talks about and Nephi talks about, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're big on the precepts of men. And these cause confusion because so very often, like today, we have a disconnect between the pulpit narrative and the scriptures narrative because they're not identical, and because of the lack of intense scriptural study and analysis. And so precepts of men abound in our church, in our gospel studies, in our manuals, in our scripture headings, in our footnotes. I could go on and on and on about those. Take, for example, the idea that we've been taught that the greater marvelous work that Isaiah talks about in chapter 29 is the restoration of the gospel and the priesthood through the prophet Joseph Smith. No, it ain't. The scriptures don't say that. That's somebody's supposition that they publish in a book, and others quote that book, and soon everybody's quoting it, and it's gospel. No, it's not gospel. The great and marvelous work, by definition, in the book of Isaiah and in the Book of Mormon, is the restoration of the whole house of Israel, who are defined literally as the Jews, the 10 lost tribes, and the Lamanites of today, or the Nephites who were at that time. Those are defined as the house of Israel, and we Latter-day Saints, by definition, are defined as the Gentiles. But we're the ones who are to restore them and to gather them to Zion at some point at the time of this great end-time exodus that Isaiah talks about and that the Book of Mormon gives us many types of. So there is one, example of what maybe you're talking about. I'm not sure.
So if you're looking at the great and marvelous work, you would say something, maybe something for you that might be a clear statement might be, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just asking you. The Book of Mormon is a tool, or maybe the tool, for the great and marvelous work, which is the gathering of Israel.
Yes. If you look at the prophecies of Nephi and Jacob and Jesus, whenever they talk about the end time, Isaiah is their go-to person. And if they prophesy anything of their own, it's generally an explanation of the words of Isaiah. And that should say something to people. And they put many words, a third of the book of Isaiah, on these plates that are really hard to inscribe. So why would they put, in Second Nephi, why would Nephi take that much time to inscribe these war scenarios in the book of Isaiah about the Assyrian wars? And if it was not an end time scenario, number one, but why would he spend so much time in it? Because it's part of an end time scenario that's coming upon us very quickly now. So, yeah. And when he sees all these things in vision that the Lord shows him, he shows him right to the end time, and he forbids him to say the last part of it. He said, John the Revelator will say it. And what does he do then? He quotes Isaiah 48 and 49, in 1 Nephi 20 and 21, to say the very things that he could have said if he had the chance to say. He uses Isaiah to say what he wanted to say. But if you don't know that and you're not looking for that, then you'll not get it. Mm-hmm. And then you have to get past all the misinterpretations of those passages that we've been handed down over the many years, since the time of Joseph Smith, but even before. We still have some of that carryover of old traditions that are false traditions, precepts of men. And then you have to still deal with those in order to get it right. You have to unlearn those precepts of men. So, for example, when one more example. And when Nephi sees that the great and abominable church took out many plain and precious parts from the scriptures, and they're talking about Isaiah specifically in many instances, then he also adds the fact, and many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. And because those two statements are in parallel, it tells you that the many plain and precious parts that they've taken away have to do with the covenants of the Lord. And this is where Isaiah comes into the picture big time, because his whole ladder to heaven concept of 7 different spiritual levels that I discovered in the book of Isaiah are all about covenants and their laws, and their higher laws and higher covenants. And so the churches, the Christian church, made people beholden to them, to the leaders of those churches, to the priests and everybody, rather than directly to God under the terms of those covenants. And we have that tendency today, unfortunately. Leaders, ecclesiastical leaders, from just looking at the way things are set up, we get the impression very often that we are beholden to them. No, we're not. We are beholden to God under the terms of covenants we make. Yes, they can give us inspirational talks and so forth to keep us in line or keep us on the right track. But no, our journey is with the Lord, Jesus Christ, not with them. And if we repeat this mantra of following this person or following that person, that's not scriptural. That's absolutely not scriptural. We are to follow Jesus Christ and gain help from those people, but not make them our idols or our go-to people for waiting for them to tell us what to do. That is so anti-gospel and anti-celestial that, those people will never become celestial who do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't see those ecclesiastical leaders even, certainly not at the top, even pushing that. Typically, it's what we seem to put into our minds, maybe even more at a local level, leadership and in our Sunday school classes and et cetera. So it becomes a cultural thing.
Yes.
For us to lift the church in a way, and I know some people don't like me saying this, but in a way, we lift up the church over God, and it's the church is there to support our covenants and our relationship with God. That's what it's for.
Absolutely.
It's not the other way around.
Yes, and you don't have to leave the church because you disagree with some stuff. That's the opposite extreme of that. Yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So here's a question. What as an example, a Book of Mormon scholar that I like, but there's some things obviously that I don't agree with him on. But one thing he says is that the whole idea of likening the words of Isaiah for Nephi to his people is more an idea of stretching the words of Isaiah and making them kind of fit into the prophecies of his own people, instead of actually saying that, as you're saying, that Isaiah saw the beginning to the end and is actually prophesying about these things. That seems to me actually to be more of a trend within Latter-day Saint scholarship of saying this likening is more, we're going to use what he said, but we're going to apply it in a way for our own people. Not because it's prophetic, but because we can use it and adapt it to our circumstances.
Yes. Well, Isaiah is an entire scenario in itself. And that kind of smacks to me of a smorgasbord, or picking and choosing what could work for us or not, rather than, you cannot isolate any one thing in the book of Isaiah from any other. If you're going to do Isaiah, you've got to do Isaiah, the whole thing. And we, as a church, and as Christians in general, have used this proof texting approach, where we have a belief, something that we believe in, and we look for evidence for it in the scriptures. Oh, there it is. This proves that what I believe is correct. No, it doesn't. You haven't connected it to this, nor to that, and you haven't, seen it in its entire context within that. Each prophet has his own kind of like view of things and his own internal paradigm. You cannot always apply one prophet's thing to another, but there are commonalities. But rather with Isaiah, you have to take the whole of Isaiah as he identifies it, he himself defines it. And there's many checks and balances in the book of Isaiah where you can do that. So many that it's a tight case. So, yeah. If you're going to do Isaiah, like I said, learn it. It's like learning a whole new language. It takes about 2 years of applied effort, using all the tools that I provide, which anybody can see what they are. They're not something spooky or different. They're just helping you, like guideposts along the way. I did not publish anything, for example, until after 10 years of postdoctoral work on Isaiah, when I used different methodologies as to check one against the other. The literary analysis to typological analysis to rhetorical analysis. I mean, all those three different strategies and different methodologies all cohere and produce the same result. And then you're on sure ground. But it's hard for many people to kind of even comprehend something like that, I think. That the fact that Isaiah is so compact and so integrated, and you've got to take the whole thing or not at all.
You talk about proof texting, and so let's say Christians are looking through Isaiah and they're trying to say, okay, well, see, here is a proofing of Christianity. What is a Jew going to look at differently in Isaiah than a Christian is? How is their approach going to be compared to a Christian approach?
Yeah, well, a Jew studying in rabbinic school, it's like the Jewish approach is, for example, we spent a whole month one time on one verse of something, and that's not even enough sometimes. A Jewish approach is saying, "Oh God, why is God telling me this in this way? Why does He say it this way? Is this literal? Is this typological? Is symbolic? Does it have different layers of meaning?" It's analyzing and connecting it with other things that the same prophet has said as far as Isaiah goes. You look up a word, for example, in the word search programs, which are amazing today that we have them on the computer. You look up a word to get Isaiah's definition of what he means by that, not what we mean by it in our preconceived minds. We have to let go of a lot of stuff that is in our minds that we've accumulated that are simply not there, not in the scriptures. So, and once we've looked up the same word in Isaiah several times, then we can kind of get a rhetorical definition of that term or what Isaiah means by that. And then we can start connecting it with other things that are associated with it. And gradually the concepts of Isaiah begin to expand in our mind as we start taking baby steps, and then eventually bigger steps, and eventually we can just run and enjoy the journey, because it becomes so rewarding and so empowering and so enlightening. And it's a joy once you get to that point.
Yeah.
But you've got to experience that to do that, and you've got to be willing to pay the price. And it's specifically hard, just like when you learn a new language, it's hard until you start actually speaking the language, and that's hard too. But then you get more confident over time, and pretty soon, hey, you get fluent.
Yeah. So here's a question. This is something that I have a difficult time with. So I'll set the stage a little bit on this. But, you've got a book that's called End Time Prophecy, and it's based on Isaiah. And you say, okay, well, Isaiah is the end time prophecy prophet, right? He's the one everybody pulls from. Okay. I see out in Latter-day Saint culture, and even in especially evangelical culture, this real focus on the end of times and the apocalypse, so to speak. And I saw someone on Twitter the other day, a Latter-day Saint, that was saying, look, the second coming may not be next year, but it sure isn't more than 5 or maybe 10 years away. And so it's like this hard focus on, hey, I know when this is happening. I know exactly when this is happening. I'm guessing it's at this time. I have a little bit of an issue with that, because I don't think anybody knows that.
Yeah.
At the same time, right, you say that because Isaiah is the end time prophecy, we can see specific events that are leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Right?
Yes.
How specific is that with Isaiah? I mean, how specific can you get with that book?
Very specific. Yeah, Isaiah. You've got to read Isaiah and see if this doesn't relate, to what you see around you in our world today. That has changed just in the last 10 years, and where it's all going the last few years. There's so much. I'd have to make a list and to show, but I don't have time right now to.
So you think that in Isaiah there is a specific map set, not generalities, but actual events and actual people in our time that can help us to read, again, the fig leaves, so to speak,
Yes.
of when Christ is coming?
I don't ever dabble in timelines. I've shied away from that. I've also shied away from future roles of people. Some people get the idea they're going to fulfill this role, and that does not interest me in the least. It's back to front. To me, it's all about doing today what the Lord wants you to do today, and then the next thing will open up when He wants you to do something else, and that is way more, to me, way more real and exciting. But yeah, those who get caught up with that stuff about timelines and roles. I think they could do some repenting, because it's off base. It's taking them away from the here and now, I think, from the reality that we're dealing with. But if you want a list of, I mean, I could mention some things. The whole people of God turning into a Sodom and Gomorrah society, practically. That is a very specific thing Isaiah talks about. The leaders of the people kind of getting a madness overcome them, so that they start making the most absurd decisions, and they remove the traditions of the people that have made them great, to going on a downward path, and the division among God's people, the division politically and ecclesiastically. In Isaiah, the political and ecclesiastical are always on a par. Think about that for a moment. There's just the covenant with death in Isaiah 28, where people, in response to a epidemic or pandemic, or a curse, or something that comes upon the land, they resort to the arm of flesh instead of to the Lord and his counsel. The pride that enters in, the Lord has things to say about the Ephraimites' pride. He talks specifically about their materialism, how it's like Moroni talks about, who's seen our day, right? What does he say? You pollutions, and you walk in the pride of your hearts, and your hearts are set upon the things of this world. And that is a form of idolatry that causes spiritual blindness. And when people are spiritually blind, they don't realize that they are. Of course, they still think that they're as good as ever. And so they keep going down that path without even realizing that they're on it. Yeah. There's so much from Isaiah that speaks. The quality of the products that Isaiah talks about, they're not the same quality as they used to be.
Does Isaiah speak directly to what's happening right now in Israel?
In the land of Israel?
In the land of Israel.
Well, Isaiah addresses the people of God, which we are as Latter-day Saints, specifically. So in Isaiah's day, he was speaking to the people of Judah, of the southern kingdom. The 10 tribes are being taken captive into Assyria. He was speaking, first of all, to both houses of Israel, then to the southern kingdom of Israel. But today, he's speaking to those who are the covenant people today, which is not the Jews, which is not the 10 tribes, which is not the Lamanites. He's speaking to us, the Latter-day Saints, the Ephraimite Gentiles, or the Ephraimites who assimilated into the Gentile nations, and as Joseph Smith said, became identified with the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. But we still have that birthright role to perform toward them, toward the house of Israel. So what's happening in the house of Israel, like the Ukraine war, for example, I have no doubt that those people of Ukraine, others of Eastern European nations, are of the house of Israel, of the 10 tribes. The Jews have had several wars, when the Lord says, upon my house shall it begin, that could include not only Latter-day Saints specifically, first of all, but also others of the house of Israel, such as the Jews in Israel right now.
You talk about the role of the servant David as a temporal king and a temporal role, and who's going to take on the burdens of a temporal society, in terms of freedom, in terms of being beyond oppression. And then you talk about the role of, I think you call him the Messiah, the role of the Messiah, or Jehovah, which is a spiritual role, and we can call that even a spiritual role of overcoming the oppression of the adversary and throwing off the shackles of sin, right? Spiritual issues.
Right.
I have studied some of these philosophies of men, so to speak, for about the last 11 years. And I am convinced that the fusion of Christianity, even within the Latter-day Saints world, and these philosophies is going to take us to liberation theology. And it is more along the lines of, hey, we're going to reduce the role of Jesus from a spiritual savior to a political messiah, and move him over here to what I think, and this is a question, to what I think you would look at it more as the servant David, and the role of the servant David here. Does that make any sense to you?
No, it doesn't, actually.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, there's two very specific roles, and one, there's no question that Jesus is the Messiah and the only one who is the true Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews have expected a David for centuries, whom they call the Messiah, but that's not Christ, and that's another person. And the Jews who understand the things of the prophets, as Nephi said, and no other people understand them like them. So they have understood correctly about that person and the things that he will do, such as he will restore the political kingdom of God on the earth prior to the coming of the Lord. And he will gather the 10 tribes or the 12 tribes of Israel to promised lands, and he will build the temple of the Lord so that when the Lord comes, he can come into the temple. And when he does these things and others, then the Jews say, then we'll know that he's that person, he's our Messiah. The Jews have never made the connection that their own Lord Jehovah is their Messiah. They haven't seen it. And Latter-day Saints have not seen that the David is actually a forerunner of Christ's coming, and that he is the one that's called the servant in the book of Isaiah. Latter-day Saints have not seen that. They have misapplied that prophecy too, and you see it in the manuals and in the scripture headings. Jesus is never called a servant in the scriptures anywhere by anybody. Jesus is the Son of God. And if you want to know more about what those names stand for, like servant and son, you have to go back to a whole theology, a Hebrew theology of an emperor-vassal covenants of the ancient Near East that Moses and Isaiah and the prophets adopted for their relationship, for defining their relationship with God. Wherein a vassal king, by proving loyal to the emperor king, he was called technically the servant of the emperor, and the emperor's called his lord. Whereas, and we see this in the temple covenants if we only understood them, in our temple covenants, right? When a vassal king proves loyal to the emperor under all conditions, their servant-lord relationship changes to a son-father relationship. He's actually adopted as the emperor's own son legally. And so he becomes the son of the emperor. And if that doesn't ring bells to those who've been to the temple, then I don't know what will. And so Jesus was never, and when Jesus came to redeem humankind through atoning for our transgressions, he never came as still under a conditional covenant. If you do this, this, and this, then I'll adopt you as your son. No, he was already the Son of God. Understand? And that's why he could be our Savior in the first place. So, yeah, there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen before you understand the scriptures as a whole, but it comes through understanding Isaiah first. And when you do, they all make sense. All the scriptures cohere with one another. And there's no more precepts of men. There's no more misinterpretations about anything.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake, so I think we then were on the same page that Jesus is not the Davidic servant.
He's not.
Okay, and that Jesus stands for a spiritual redemption, not a political redemption.
Yes.
Okay.
Jesus' salvation is completely spiritual salvation, but from that spiritual salvation flows all other salvations, including physical and temporal. Right. Without Jesus' atonement, none of that could come after. Right. But that servants, or the servant David's, and that's what his name is. He's not Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they call him David. The Lord calls him David. Joseph Smith calls him David. And I think it's page 337 of the Teaching of the Prophet Joseph Smith, where he says that the Lord will raise up one out of David's lineage, called David, in the end time, basically to do what this person does. And that is to prepare the way among the Lord's people, among the house of Israel specifically, for the coming of the Lord. And he's not only like a John the Baptist, but he's also like an Enoch. When Enoch was commanded of the Lord to gather a righteous people out of 7 nations who had corrupted themselves, his preaching brought together a people who became a Zion people. But it was only after they became a Zion people that the Lord could come and dwell with them. And so it is in the end time. This person raises up, gathers the house of Israel with the aid of 144,000 servants, by the way, who are also in Isaiah, except they're called servants in Isaiah, on a seraph level, and Isaiah is translated or seraph level. And these gather Israel in the end time after they, and help them to establish Zion. And when they have established Zion, then the Lord can come and dwell among them, but not until that time. And that happens, it's right before the coming of the Lord, during the time of immense worldwide destruction that we haven't seen anything like yet. Yeah.
So going beyond that to with the role of the servant, you have something that you call the servant-tyrant parallelism.
Yes.
And this is using Isaiah 14 along with the suffering servant, in 52, 53.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? What are the opposites here? What are we talking about? We've got the role of the servant, and then we've got the role of the tyrant in 14.
Yes. Right. So first of all, Paul said that Jesus came in the form of a servant, and that is in the form of a vassal king to an emperor. And indeed, his role is that of a vassal king who answers to the emperor for the disloyalties of the vassal's people to the emperor. In other words, Jesus takes upon himself our disloyalties and answers for them to his emperor, which is the Father, the Most High God, right? So that is fulfilling the role of a servant to an emperor, as it were, within the gospel and covenant paradigm that Moses and the prophets and Isaiah use. So where were we going with that? Was the sixth part of you?
Well, just explaining the juxtaposition of the tyrant versus
the tyrant. Yes. Sorry,
versus the servant.
Right. So having established the idea that Jesus came in the form of a servant, when you read chapters 14 and compare them with Isaiah 52 and 53, then there are 21 parallel verses, but antithetically parallel verses between the one and the other, between the person spoken of in Isaiah 53, 1 through 10, but also the last few verses of Isaiah 53 and the last few verses of Isaiah 52. And all of these are juxtaposed with the tyrant king, who is, chapter 14, the king of Babylon. Well, the king of Babylon is the same person in Isaiah as the king of Assyria. Assyrian conquerors of Babylon call themselves king of Assyria also. And Isaiah has word links to show clearly that the two are different types of the same end time individual. Because in Isaiah, you have what's called a composite of types, where several ancient figures in the past can be types of the same one end time person, if that makes sense, such as the servant. So yes, so when you read down these 21 verses, one person does the opposite of what the other one does, or one person has the opposite characteristics of what the other one has, and all the way down through Isaiah 52 and 53. So in other words, you really cannot you cannot assume to know what Isaiah 53 is talking about without also knowing what Isaiah 14 is talking about, and how these two are two great archetypes of good and evil, for example, and how one, exalts himself before being utterly humiliated. and how one humbles himself before being, exalted as the Most High. So these literary patterns, these literary devices that Isaiah uses, teach you all these things that you would not normally have figured out. And you've got to take them into account, not only in those specific passages, but also all throughout the book of Isaiah. You know what I'm saying? You've got to keep those things in the back of your head. And every time that I would make a new discovery like that in the book of Isaiah, I had to totally revamp my thinking about what I previously understood about Isaiah. And that kept happening and kept happening. And the ripple effects of one evidence, on all the other things in the book of Isaiah, and then upon the gospel or the scriptures as a whole as well. So Isaiah is just an exciting journey when you take it on like that. And finally, you figure it all out. It's all there. And you can answer any question about anything.
Well, that would be nice to figure it all out.
Yes, it's exciting.
What about, as you're speaking about the servant tyrant parallelism?
Yes.
What comes to mind, because you brought up almost verbatim the way I talk about Lehi's dream, where you have the tree of life. To me, the primary focus there is condescension. This is from 1 Nephi 11, and it's the condescension and then being exalted. And then on the opposite side, you have the great and spacious building, which lifts itself up, but will have a great fall. That's almost verbatim what you just said. Do you think that there's any kind of a connection there at all? If Lehi is having this dream and he's focused on the book of Isaiah, does that seem at all like a servant tyrant juxtaposition to you?
Yes, exactly that. And when I said you have to keep these things in mind, then when you do, you see them all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You see them in the different halls of the temple, from going from primitive to celestial, terrestrial, celestial, and so forth. You see them in, like you say, in Lehi's and Nephi's dream of the tree of life, not only in the great and spacious building, but also in the filthy river. And that filthy river also contained people that were going down to, well, basically to annihilation, to the second spiritual death, the second death, or the spiritual death. You see that kind of thing at Mount Sinai, where you have the Lord on top of Mount Sinai speaking to Moses and to the 70 elders of Israel. And while the people at the bottom of the mount, see all these thunders and lightnings, and that's all their experience with God. Whereas they were eating bread with the Lord on the top of Mount Sinai. So yeah, you see those different, Paul's scenario, Paul's prophecy about, or seeing the different glories, one like the sun, one like the moon, one like the stars. Isaiah's 7 spiritual levels includes the perdition category, which would be like this filthy water in Lehi's vision. And he also sees the Babylon category, which would be the great and spacious building, which has a great fall. Because Babylon has a great fall, so does the whore, that Nephi sees in vision. Nephi calls it the whore because in his lifetime, Babylon was still a political power. I think that's why he changes the imagery a little bit. But it's the same thing. The whore, the great bomb, is the whore of all the earth is Babylon. Everything that is not Zion is Babylon. Everything that's not the great and abominable church are the saints of the church of the Lamb, and so forth. Yeah. So it's all over the place.
So speaking of these ancient civilizations and comparing them to today, one of them is Egypt, that is found in Isaiah. You compare that to the United States.
No, Isaiah does.
Okay, very well. Okay, Isaiah compares Egypt to the United States. Can you talk about that a little bit? How is ancient Egypt being used as both part of a foe to Israel, so to speak, but also as a future kingdom, a contemporary kingdom here with the United States?
Yeah, Egypt was not really a foe or an enemy to Israel. Egypt was kind of a place where refugees from Israel always were welcome, it seemed like. Mary and Joseph going down to Egypt for a while.
Jeremiah, Uriah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Egypt was a go-to place, and so was America being. Now, okay, let's transpose the entire end time scenario of Isaiah's the historical scenario of Isaiah's day onto an end time scenario. Let's do that. Well, what happens to the names then of those nations that existed in Isaiah's day? Is Egypt still Egypt in the Middle East today? No, it's not. You have to go by the way Isaiah characterizes those nations in his day. And how did he characterize Egypt? Egypt was the great superpower of Isaiah's day, of the Middle East. It was the superpower of the Middle East. And it kept Assyria at bay. It was friend to smaller nations of the world, as America has been in our day and age. And so Isaiah chooses to write only select things out of his own day to depict what's in our day. No, he doesn't say it all. He just has the thing that he knows will typify what happens in our day. And the Book of Mormon does the same thing when they say you were at less than 100 prior. They wrote things like, things that you read Helaman in the Book of Helaman and say, well, this is like our day, and this is like our day, and this is, yeah, because they picked those things specifically knowing and seeing our day, having seen our day, to apprise us, Gentiles, and their descendants about, what's coming down the pike for us. So, yeah, so when we impose the book of Isaiah upon the end time, then Egypt becomes a code name for America. Assyria becomes a code name for a northern military power that wants to conquer the entire world, and it's alliance. It's an alliance of nations led by Assyria. So then all those things become code names, and even Israel and Jerusalem, Jerusalem could become a code name for Salt Lake City, or Israel or Judah become a code name for Latter-day Saints. You know what I'm saying? That's how it works. And it changes the whole dynamic of your understanding of Isaiah, because now it's talking about us, and we can truly do what Nephi said and apply the prophecies to ourselves for our own profit and learning, because it is talking about us, right? It is now literally talking about us. Under code names, yes, but still about us.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. So when I read Egypt in Isaiah, I need to think United States.
Do, and read chapter 19, and if that's not about us,
oh yeah, the conversion of Egypt.
Yeah, read it in the Isaiah Institute translation, okay? Because when I did my translation, it's been a year when we're doing it, comparing every single word, dictionaries, lexicons, concordances, 12 other translations, modern translation. I try to put it in that end time context as much as would allow, still be true to the Hebrew, So it's way more understandable than the King James. If you haven't been not acquainted with the Isaiah Institute translation, go to the website isaiahexplained.com, and there you have the King James comparison with the Isaiah Institute translation, word for word, and with the Hebrew as well. And in my books too, I have it in my books as well.
So last question that I have for you is the gathering of Israel. Tell me about the 10 tribes. What is going on there with that? Is this actually a separate people? You mentioned the Ephraimite Gentiles. I actually really like that term. I haven't heard that before. I like that term. Where are the 10 tribes? What is happening with them? They need to gather back, as well as the Jews, to back to Zion. What's going on with the 10 tribes?
Right. So they went into the north countries of 722 BC. And they went into Assyria first, taken captive there. And then they took a year, they counseled together according to the book of Ezra, I think Ezra, fourth book of Ezra, is it, or the second? I think it's the fourth Ezra. They took counsel together and migrated a year and a half's journey through the Caucasus into Eastern Europe. And some of them kept migrating west. And so you have these waves of people going west, the Goths, the Visigoths, all of them, one after the other. But some of them settled where they were. And so you have probably most of them today, since most members of the church who have been getting patriarchal blessings today are of the tribe of Ephraim. And that's what the early brethren of the Restoration period said, that it's Ephraim that's been gathering. And Ephraim has to gather until Ephraim becomes strong enough to gather the rest of the house of Israel. And that is the Jews and the Lamanites and 10 tribes of today. And that it happens at a certain time when that servant, David, is commissioned of God to do that, to gather Israel, as the Jews also expect him to do from their own scriptures, such as Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Isaiah. And so then they go out during a time of calamity, during a time of worldwide calamity, and gather them out. And as far as the 10 tribes are concerned, they will come from the north countries, it says in the Doctrine and Covenants also. And from in Isaiah, it says that. And the Book of Mormon says it. And Jeremiah says they'll even come out of the earth, you know. So some of them it seems like they've had protection there somewhere. And I heard from Native Americans also during the Ice Age that the Lord had places of protection like that for them way up north of the earth. Kind of a shelter within the larger surface of the earth. And they will come in an actual physical exodus led by the Lord and by the servants of the Lord, the 144,000 servants. Like Isaiah says in 48, 49, and some of them they will carry in their arms and upon their shoulders. And some say they will go through portals even to bring them straight to Zion. But mostly they'll be journeying for some time. And the scriptures describe those journeys. And as for the Lamanites, they will gather to the New Jerusalem. The 10 tribes will gather to the New Jerusalem, as we know from the scriptures. And no doubt the Nephites, whom I consider mostly Polynesians, likely, will gather to the New Jerusalem. The Jews, Joseph Smith said, will gather to the Old Jerusalem and build their temple there. The believing Jews will build it. So that means that the religious will not be. Okay, so most people have difficulty understanding that two different factions of Jews that we have today, about 90% are secular Jews in Israel, and 10% are religious Jews. But Isaiah says there'll be a beginning. The Book of Mormon says there'll be a beginning of gathering and a beginning of belief among the Jews. And actually, Lehi predicted that. And today you have the beginning of gathering of the Jews who migrated thus far, and many of them are beginning to believe indeed, and many of the Jewish pioneers that migrated, first of all, to Israel were believers in Jesus. Some of them have told me that when I lived there 5 years. So just Ephraim has been gathering, so some of them have been gathering. And when the rest of them gather, there'll be those there to welcome them, as Isaiah says, to gather them home, to welcome them home. But the gathering will be done by the 144,000 servants and by that one servant called David.
Okay. Well, Avraham, this has been fascinating. I'm very interested. You know, when I talk to you, I become very excited about the book of Isaiah. I want to learn more. I want to understand it more. I love the idea of the structures, the parallelism, the 7 levels of spirituality. I hope that people, if there's one thing people take out of this, it's dig into Isaiah more. And one way they can do that is they can go to your website at the IsaiahInstitute.com and learn a little bit more about, like we talked about, these bridges that you kind of build to understanding the book of Isaiah. Is there anything else you wanted to get in here before we end the interview?
Yeah, I would recommend that people go to IsaiahExplained.com, first of all, and you can give them the link for that if you'd like, Greg. Mm-hmm. And there you'll have a 30-hour, analytical commentary, just analyzing totally what it says, no opinions, no fluff. And there you can see the comparative translation, and there's teaching tools there for understanding, and videos, 7 videos. And the book End Time Prophecies, one I'd recommend, not for beginners necessarily. I'd recommend something like Isaiah Made Simple, or Isaiah Prophet of the End Time is a small book that I have for beginners. I don't recommend any, Isaiah for Dummies books. I don't do them because once you finish an Isaiah for Dummies book, you're still a dummy. But that doesn't work very well. So, but Isaiah keeps on giving, and that's the beautiful part about Isaiah. So get into it and just take some baby steps, and you'll see exactly, how it starts to make sense. Okay.
Well,
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time. I hope maybe we can do another one down the road as well and ask a few more questions. But really appreciate what you've shared with us. It's exciting, and I hope people delve into it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. Okay.